Hey, folks. Welcome to another Spooky Appalachia. So, tonight I'm joined by Jared from Jared King TV.
Hey folks, how you doing?
We're going over some spooky Appalachian witch stories.
Yeah, which I believe is a very first for your channel, right?
That's correct. We've never done any, well, we've done the Black Sisters,
Well, yeah,
so I
yeah,
guess that counts. But we figured in the spirit of Halloween that we would go over 5 Appalachian witch stories just for you guys.
absolutely.
Jared, I believe that you were going to read the first one.
Yeah. Now, folks, this story was sent to me by one of my dear friends, Hassie Bell. She said, when I was in my early 20s, so there was this old lady everybody said was a witch, and she lived down the road from us. So she was always in the mountains gathering herbs and such. So I used to think that she was an herbalist of sorts, till one night, me and two cousins were walking home from going to the picture show. We was walking down the road, and all of a sudden, we began to hear something, almost like somebody talking or mumbling, coming just from the wood line off the side of the road. Well, us being young and a little nosy, went to investigate. So as we got through the wood line off the road, we heard it more clear, so we knew we was close. We come up on a small clearing under some pine trees, and there was this old witch woman. She had a small fire and had something in her hand. Also had a big old pot over the fire, and she was waving her hands and rocking back and forth while she was on her knees, while mumbling something that my cousin later said was chanting. What scared us the most is the fact that there was no possible way she could have heard us. Yet she suddenly stopped, turned around, and looked exactly where we were hunkered down. She smiled and waved. We jumped and ran, and as she began to we jumped and ran as she began to laugh. So I've never been so scared in all my life. We ran all the way home. So we agreed not to say anything to our parents. And for weeks after, whenever I'd see her passing by, she'd slow down. And no matter where I was, inside or what, she'd look directly at me, smile, wave, and cackle out laughing before walking on her way.
Ooh, man.
Yeah. Oh, and I said, whoo. Oh man, when I first read that one, man, that sent chills up my
It
spine.
did. It gave me the chills while you were reading it.
I'm telling you, that's just one of them. It's like, ugh.
Yeah, exactly. Mm. Well, for our next story, I was going to talk about the Black Sisters from Christiansburg, Virginia.
This is a
Who,
wild one.
yeah, they were rumored to be witches in. This is from the town I grew up in. I don't live there anymore, but they were big talk of the town, even 100 years later.
Right, right. That's what I started saying. They have been for a long time.
And everybody that went to the Christiansburg middle and high school, everybody was always saying they saw something weird or strange. And then the building, the old Christiansburg Middle School, was on top of their former college, I believe it was, and that's why it was haunted, or said to be haunted by them. Like, I would go there. It wasn't my main school, but I went there some, and my grandma worked there, and it just always felt, you know, how some of those paranormal type places are. If you visit, they just have a heaviness to them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, buddy.
It just doesn't feel right, and you want to get out of there. That's how it felt to
Yeah.
me. It just did not feel right, and I always wanted to get out of there.
Wow. And what I always thought was interesting about this story here, especially about the Black Sisters, is the more you dig into it, researching it and history and everything else, the more you dig, the more you find. You know, there's so many families out there that has stories, uh, people, from their family history that passed down from, back when they were around and things. And it's just so wild.
Hmm. This might be one of the most well-known haunting and witch stories around.
I believe so. I believe
There's even
so.
a movie about them now.
Yeah, it sure is.
I don't know if you saw that.
I ain't, man. I need to look that up for sure.
I need to too, especially since it's from my former town.
Right.
But I'll go ahead and get into it.
All right.
This story is about the Black Sisters of Christiansburg, Virginia. I've heard many stories about the Black Sisters. Today I will share with you some of the local legends and stories that I've heard growing up. From what I can find, the three sisters were called the Black Sisters because they wore all black clothing. They wore black shoes, dresses, gloves, hats, and veils, as though they were going to a funeral or mourning. Because they dressed this way, they quickly became the talk of the town, and most folks accused them of being witches. Their names were Mary Sneed, Caroline Martin, and Virginia Warlaud. Mary and Caroline came to Christiansburg around 1902 to help their sister Virginia run the Montgomery County Female Academy. Around this time, a few mysterious events began to happen. First, there was the disappearance of a controversial, illegitimate baby birthed by one of the students at the school. Shortly after, Mary's son John was found burned to death in a bed just a week after his mother and aunts had taken out a very large insurance policy on him. Sometime later, Caroline's daughter Osie came to town and married her first cousin, Mary's son, Fletcher Sneed. Sometime after, Osie became pregnant and Fletcher left town. And so it was up to the Black Sisters to take care of her. It turns out they didn't take very good care of Osie and the baby after all. Shortly after the baby was born, it died to malnutrition. After that, Osie was found drowned in a bathtub just days after a large insurance policy was taken out on her as well. After all of these events, the sisters left town for New Jersey. Soon after their arrival, the authorities caught up with them. Caroline was convicted of murder and sentenced to 7 years in a mental hospital where she later died. Mary pled guilty but got off on a technicality, and after that she fled to Colorado. Finally, Virginia starved herself to death before she ever saw a judge. Now, from what I've heard, there are two locations that the Black Sisters are said to haunt. The first one is the old Christiansburg Middle School building. The former middle school, which is now the Montgomery County Public school's technology center was built on top of the Montgomery County Female Academy, where it once stood. There have been reports of lights going out randomly, whispers and footsteps in the hallways when no one else is around, and dark, shadowy figures in some of the rooms and hallways. The other location I've heard is one of the sisters is said to haunt Sunset Cemetery. This is where Virginia Warlord is said to be buried. Supposedly, a taxi driver claimed to have taken them to the cemetery on multiple occasions, where they conducted some type of rituals at a grave site. Was this ritual something that would allow them to later return? Rumor is that the grave they were performing the rituals on was the one Virginia was buried in. I've heard several people claim to have had seen their spirits in the cemetery. For the most part, people report seeing shadow figures darting around the cemetery at night. But I've heard stories growing up that Virginia can be seen dancing around the cemetery at midnight.
Dang.
Yeah.
Man, now that's a wild one right there.
Hmm. I think one of these days, me and you should do one of these just on them alone. There's a lot. I Donald, my buddy Donald that does the
Right.
location videos with me. He went to that school and he saw a shadow darting one time when he was going to the bathroom,
Man.
and he said
Yeah.
apparently there's supposed to be a well under the gymnasium, and that's where they tossed the infant baby, and you
Wow.
can hear that baby screaming sometimes.
Goodness. Whew.
Yeah. Oh
That
man.
alone is just.
Wow. Yeah. Um, I believe, yeah, in the video I did from that old middle school, if you remember, there's a figure in one of the windows in the video.
Yes, that is freaky. Guys, if you haven't checked out that video on Spooky Appalachia, go look that up.
It's a like a white looking face in a window.
Yeah, it was an amazing capture, but also a freaky one.
Hmm. And we didn't know it was there.
Yeah. All right, folks. The next one we got up is called the Witch's Swamp. Years ago, there was an old farm woman named Minnie Van Sickle that everybody said was a witch in our neighborhood. She lived on a curve in the road in a run-down old farmhouse and had 2 barns and a shed on her property. I remember riding down the road at night with my folks when I was a kid, and as the car would approach the bend in the road where she lived at, the headlights would illuminate her front porch, and sometimes she'd be sitting on the porch glaring at us as we went around the bend. I once asked my great Aunt Jane about her, and she bluntly replied, "She's a witch." Another time, I asked an old farm widder in her neighborhood about her. Now, this woman here was a highly Christian woman, and when I asked her if Minnie was a witch, she kindly hesitated and replied, "Well, she's done some strange things," and that's all she said. Her land was once farmed by her husband, but before he died, he sold off all the farm ground to a man named Nicholson. But he kept the house and the barns and about 5, 6 acres of his land. Nicholson was one of them fellers who had a lot of money and bought up land to eventually develop into houses. However, he never moved as fast, and sometimes it's years before he does anything with the ground he buys. For instance, I used to squirrel hunt on his land, and today there's a big old fancy home right where I used to sit and hunt gray squirrel. Well, apparently, even though Minnie no longer owned her farm ground, she would still try to run people off of it. I heard men talk of being back there in the woods early of a morning, waiting on the squirrels to start moving around, when it was almost as if she come out of nowhere. Said Minnie would be standing there, glaring at them and pointing with a bony finger, saying, "Get off my land." Nicholson tried talking to her, but done no good. She continued to harass hunters and root diggers right up till she died. She told Nicholson, "You'll never get to use my land for anything, Jim Nicholson. I'll see to it." When Minnie died, somebody burned down her house, and later some came and burned down the barns and sheds. Nothing's left but a crumbling spring house down by the slope of her former home. When she died, having no heirs, her 6 acres come up on tax sale, and a man named Doherty bought it, and to this day has done nothing with the property. So in the years after Minnie's death, her former farm began to spring up pockets of marshy ground. Nobody had an explanation for it, but year after year, the ground became more swampy and worthless for anything but game hunting. Then over the years, it even became too difficult to hunt in. And here and there, the growing swamp, you can find the deer stand that now sits out in the water, still attached to a tree. The place is now just a home for muskrats, coons, bobcats, good for trapping. And being a trapper, I asked Nicholson for permission to trap on him, which he granted. He just gave me a warning to watch for sinkholes and quicksand. First year I trapped, I did pretty good, but he was right about them sinkholes. I once found a muskrat lodge built over what looked like a deep sinkhole. So I cut a pole and run it down into the water. The thing went down about 8 foot and still couldn't touch bottom. Twice I broke through the surface and sunk up over my knees, and was lucky both times to have a partner trapping with me. One of the creepiest things was finding fence posts sticking up out of that swamp with fence wire still stapled to it. The land certainly had a gloomy air to it, and it still does. What made me finally quit trapping the place weren't the lack of critters nor the swampy ground. It was the handprints. One morning I was headed back into the swamp to check my traps, and I noticed a white handprint on a tree right where I went in. More than that, as I followed my line, I began to notice more handprints on more trees. I didn't touch them, but they seemed to be made of some sort of powder. This kept going on, and that spooked me. I figured somebody was watching me, so one morning I entered the swamp at a point where I'd never gone into before. The next morning, there was the white handprints on the trees in the obscure place I had entered. Well, that was enough for me. I quit trapping there and won't enter that place anymore. I took some photos from around the place, but I'll never set foot in that swamp again. Old Nicholson is gone now, and his son owns the ground. He says it's a worthless piece of property to him, and it's been classified as a wetland, so it can never be used for anything except waterfowl and critters that live in it. And maybe, just maybe, the spirit of a witch who to this day won't let anybody use her land.
Wow.
Man, that was a good one. And thanks so much for Steve Shackelford, Alligator Horse, for sending that one in.
Yeah, definitely check out his YouTube channel.
That was an amazing story.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that kept sticking out in that story to me was, like he said, them handprints.
Yeah.
You know, how did they get there? What was, and the powder? It seemed like they made it some sort of powder. What, I wonder if it could have been like some kind of ashes or something.
Ugh. The fence posts, the sunken fence post with the wire attached still, that's pretty weird too.
Yeah, definitely.
Normally the current from the water, or the water, pushing it would
Oh yeah, it would have
knock
took that
that out.
down and
Uh,
everything.
that, or it would have rusted out.
Right, right. And eventually, over the years, the water probably would have, rotted the wood away and stuff like
Mhm.
that. Just all kind of factors when it comes to stuff being underwater.
Mhm. Mm.
Man, that was definitely a good one too.
Mhm. So next is one my brother-in-law told me about. Um he he, uh he found out about it from his mail route near Withville, Virginia.
Yeah, this is a good one too.
One of his coworkers told him to watch out delivering mail near the witch's house at the end of town. He said that a lot of strange stuff happened near there. The other mailmen did not want that route, so it was given to my brother-in-law, being the new guy. The story is, took place about 11 or 12 years ago. A lady lived there. She was kind of a hermit and kept to herself. Even back then, no one wanted to deliver to her house. They all said she was a witch, and she would sneak up on anyone who came by and chase them off. People said animals would go missing, and people too, from that area. Eventually, she passed away, maybe about a year after that. A huge storm came into town. All the houses in the area were damaged, except for the witch's house. It was in perfect condition, and even 10 years later, the house is sit abandoned for 10 years, and it looks exactly the same. And to this day, no one wants to go near the place. There are rumors that the spirit of the old lady will show up and run off anyone who comes near.
Dang, that was a real good one too.
Yeah, he showed me a picture of the house. It looks like somebody lives there, but nobody lives there. There's like a sign on the gate that goes up to the house. It says to keep out, and something about abandoned property. I hadn't seen it in years, but
Wow.
the house looks perfect, but the grass is all overgrown and everything.
Right. And
It is
being
just bizarre.
abandoned for 10 years
Yeah,
and but looking like it's brand new. Wow. I mean, that's
yeah.
just wow. Kind of makes you wonder if, that's true. Maybe
If she
she put some kind of
put,
spell on it or something.
yeah, to protect the place.
Yeah. All righty, folks. Next up, we got one called Witch at the Church. Deep in the woods of Appalachia, past an old war ravaged town, there's a cemetery on top of a hill. There's an old yet abandoned church, lost to time. All that remains is four brick windowless walls covered in graffiti and vines. The roof is barely hanging on. This place is where an old Appalachian witch named Joyce Bishop did these vile things. This place is riddled with horrible history. Slaves being hanged for running away, all kinds of stuff. Joyce Bishop performed rituals inside the shell of a church. She sacrificed innocent animals in a hole in the concrete floor, paying tribute to evil spirits, or even the old devil himself. When she passed, she was buried in the cemetery. And when nighttime rolls around, she roams the cemetery looking for trespassers to run off. Only she can use this place for her own. And it is told that she'll appear to you, telling you that you don't belong here and leave this place now. Then she runs to you, disappearing just before she gets to you. As you walk through the cemetery, you can feel somebody following you, touching you, and breathing down your neck. So when you're out in Appalachia, you better know where you are. That's another one right there that'll just run the hair up on the back of your neck.
Yeah,
Just
definitely.
thinking about it. Woo, mercy.
And this one's from our friends at Myers Paranormal, I believe. Is that
Yep.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Big
And
thanks
he
to
also
them.
has, he also has a channel called Myers Tales of Appalachia.
Well, big thanks to you guys for sending us that for this little collaboration for all y'all to listen to for this wonderful Halloween month.
Absolutely, man. These were some real good ones.
I hope people like this one. I sure did.
Oh, yeah. Me too, man. Me too. And folks, if
I
you
would,
got any, send them to us.
yeah, we'd love to do some more witch stories. They're
Absolutely.
always good, always. So you can,
Absolutely.
if you see down there in the little ticker, you can email us at spookyappalachia@gmail.com.
Definitely. And let us know what you thought about this one, too.
Yeah, did you like this? And we're thinking about going forward doing a Friday premiere once a month with a collection of stories and featuring it on the channel.
Absolutely. So,
If y'all like it, let me know, and we'll keep doing it. It's been fun.
oh, yeah, it's been a blast.
And we hope you enjoy it, and that you'll tune in for the next one. And big thanks to Jared for coming on today. And check out his channel, Jared King TV, where he tells some amazing Appalachian stories too.
Thanks so much.
Yeah,
It's always an honor to be here.
well, I appreciate you. All right, folks, that's it for now. Definitely make sure you subscribe, like, share this out, and tell all your
Absolutely.
friends and kinfolk, and
Yeah, buddy.
keep coming back for more.
And have a safe and blessed Halloween.
Good night, folks.
God bless and have a good one.